Hello viewers and welcome to another match of Warhammer 40,000 Conquest. My name is Mitch and I am the Hive Tyrant. Today we have another Legions of Death preview match proxying one of our two upcoming Necrons faction warlords Nahumekh at the bottom of our screen, played by Guy Lev. Both of our players are currently deciding whether or not they want to keep their opening hands, and it looks like Glaive Guy Lev has decided to ditch his opening hand. At the top of our screen, playing as a rather janky version of our original Chaos faction warlord Zarathur, we have Brian Kupcheck, aka Hoop Jones, of Team Sandcrawler fame. Our first deploy phase starts, and it looks like our Necron player has chosen the Eldar as his enslaved faction. Brian decided to ditch his opening hand as well. Note that the initiative begins with Zarathur. Planet number 1 is going to be Barlas, the random card discard planet. And just assessing our Necron player's opening hand, he's got a copy of some cheap arm units like the Tallarn Raiders, one of the Warlord friends. He's got a copy of our Same Han Kinsman, which at a green planet is going to be a 2/2 for just one resource, and he's got reanimation protocols to heal Necrons. He's got a Gauss Flare. You affix that to a Necron, you decrease HP. He's got a signature army unit, and then he's got a copy of Mandragoran Immortals. It's a 2/3 ranged for 3, and he can sacrifice a non-Necron soldier like Tallarn Raiders in order to ready it. Limit once per phase, but it's potentially a lot of damage going out during ranged, and with something like a Gauss Flare, that could be all the more damage or damage equivalent dealt during ranged or before ranged. Here at planet number 5, we've got a copy of Same Han Kinsman, and we may as well talk about the big guy himself. Nahumekh is a 2/6, and at the beginning of the combat phase, you target an enemy army unit, and it gets minus X HP until the end of the phase, which stacks nicely with Gauss Flare, and X is going to be equal to the number of non-Necron factions among units you control. So currently that's going to be 1, courtesy of this Eldar faction unit. Kind of the shitty thing about Nahumekh is you can only pick one faction for your enslavement dial per turn, unless you can get a copy of his signature attachment, the Staff of Command, in which case you can potentially deploy from 2 different factions. It looks like in Legions of Death there's quite a bit more support for Onrakir right out the gate, but hopefully Nahumekh still has a few surprises left to be seen, because there's still something around 5 to 7 Necron faction cards in Legions of Death that we have yet to see, and of course there's a common army unit for each of our original 7 factions, which works better when you're playing a non-faction affiliation matching warlord. So there could be hope yet for Nahumekh. At planet number 5, we see a copy of Splintered Path Acolyte opposite that Same Han Kinsman, and at planet number 2, we've got a Destroyer Cultist. So this is the signature army unit for Nahumekh. 3 cost, 1 command icon, 1/4, but it gets an additional attack value for each non-Necron faction among units you control. Currently, it's going to be swinging for 2, albeit at the cost of 3 resources, so it's just barely passing that vanilla test, and at the moment, it doesn't really have any incredibly powerful ability, but perhaps next turn. Here at planet number 1, we've got a copy of Master Warpsmith. It kind of unveils the jank inherent to this Zarathur faction deck. It's a 2/4 with a couple command icons, and whenever you sack a cultist, you reduce the cost of elite units. So perhaps Ravenous Fleshhounds are in Brian's deck, or perhaps he's just going to be having myriad means of generating cultists like Zave's Split Tongue in order to put out some Chaos elites in mass. So expect Corrupted Teleportarium, expect Ancient Keeper of Secrets, maybe we'll even see something along the lines of a Frenzied Bloodthirster. So, at planet number 3, we've got that Mandragoran Immortals with a promotion opposite a copy of Rogue Trader. Note that neutral units don't belong to any factions, so you could play those at any time if you're a Necron player. And during the command phase, both of our players here are going to be deciding where exactly they want to send their respective warlords. Planet number 1, I can't really see Nahumekh arriving at that destination to fight a 2-4 by himself, and indeed he's going to end up showing up at planet number 5, so he's going to be able to relocate one of his units. Note that planets 1 and 2 being Zarathur's destination, those are going to be won by Brian, and planets 3 and 5 are going to be won by Nahumekh. Unfortunately for our Chaos faction player, at the beginning of the combat phase, Nahumekh is going to end up clearing out this Splintered Path Acolyte. He'll immediately drop it to 0 HP, and it looks like during the command phase, it's 2 cards and 2 resources for each of our players. So, our Master Warpsmith possessing Zarathur doesn't have an elite demon to put into play, but he does have a copy of Promise of Glory. His Master Warpsmith is still very much alive. It's going to end up winning that planet, and note that at the beginning of the combat phase, that has successfully destroyed that Splintered Path Acolyte there. And of course, because it's a cultist, Master Warpsmith only affects cultist tokens, so never mind what I was going to say. Glaive Guy ended up getting a copy of Earthcast Technician, which is potentially pretty good to fetch drones and attachments from his deck, whether it's Hyperphase Swords or Canoptech Scarab Swarms or more Gauss Flares, but the random card discard associated with Barlas ended up getting rid of that Earthcast Technician, and because Onrakir and Nahumekh are rather dissimilar, once this ECT is in the discard pile of Nahumekh, it's presumably going to be staying there. Zarathur is going to be triggering a combat against this Destroyer cultist. Zarathur's got a fair few shields and other tricks in hand, but Zarathur takes a swing of 2, hits the cultist. We're going to come to the end of the combat round here, and the cultist has managed to deal a couple of points to Zarathur as well. Unfortunately for our Necron's sake, Zarathur is going to be immune to this reaction, which can only trigger army units, but it seems as though both players have decided to stay. So Zarathur, note that Iridial is not on the board, so this is a little bit ballsy for our Chaos faction warlord. The Destroyer cultist is going to necessitate the use of a shield in order to preserve it. Looks like it does survive because we see Recycle Discard. It was erroneously placed at the bottom of our Necron player's discard pile, but that scarcely matters. We see the Destroyer cultist swing in return. 2 is going to be dropped to 0 thanks to the timely interjection of a copy of Slaanesha's Temptation. Recycle is going to be a nice Necron card to improve your card quality in your hand. You discard 2, then you draw 3, so you discard garbage, like Decaying Warrior Squad that you can play from your discard pile, but it just looks like it didn't exactly work out here, so both of our players decide to stay yet again. Reanimation Protocols is going to pull a couple of points of damage off of that Destroyer cultist, and there we go. That is going to be that copy of Archon's Terror. I think if it were me, I'd have probably taken a swing at the Destroyer cultist prior to removing it from the planet, and then that route associated with Farron is going to result in the Mandragoran Immortals being removed from planet number 2. Nahumekh is going to end up winning a battle at planet number 5, and Planum is going to result in the Mandragoran Immortals being moved to our new planet number 1, Farron. We see an HQ phase come and go. That's going to be 2 cards and 4 resources for each of our players. And the reason I kind of called out Zarathur for not attacking the Destroyer cultist prior to using Archon's Terror is because since our enslavement dial was set to Eldar, there was no possibility for an Eldar ambush unit. Like, even if Guy would have had a copy of Eager Recruit in hand, he wouldn't have been able to deploy it because his enslavement dial was set to Eldar. But we've got Astra Militarum selected on our enslavement dial. We've got a copy of Tallarn Raiders at planet number 1. So like I said before, if Zarathur shows up at that planet, we could have the Mandragoran Immortals attack during range for 2. They could sack the Tallarn Raiders, a soldier, then they could attack again for 2, all during the range skirmish. Although Zarathur does have the luxury of another copy of Archon's Terror, we see that Promise of Glory, which, thanks to the Master Warpsmith, could easily allow Zarathur to afford the Zarathur's Flamers and the Rotten Plague Bears, and for the cost of a 0-cost event, that's definitely a considerable value there. The Flamers could attack for 3, or they could just be blown up and deal 3 points of damage to the Immortals. But what exactly is our Necron player tossing out there? We see another Destroyer Cultist put at planet number 1. Because we've now got an Astra Militarum and an Eldar unit in play, the Destroyer Cultists are going to be attacking for 3, and whatever planet Nahumekh arrives at the beginning of combat, he's going to be pulling 2, well, he's basically going to be subtracting 2 hit points from a unit. So Zarathur's Flamers, for instance, they could use their action during the command phase, but the instant that combat occurs, they could be immediately killed, and the Rotten Plague Bearers, I suppose the same thing goes with those. You'd sure as shit better use those during the command phase, because at the very onset of combat, they're going to be outright annihilated. Looks like Nahumekh is going to be able to reasonably likely win at planet number 1, and therefore Nahumekh could arrive at planet number 2 to kill off this rogue trader to win a card at that planet. He'd drop off this copy of the Destroyer Cultist, or otherwise he could go to Karnath. We've now got a copy of Rotten Plague Bears opposite this same Han Kinsman, which means that neither player is currently winning command at that planet. Our new 5th planet is going to be Taurus, which, if you win a battle at that planet, if you've got fewer units than your opponent, you can win 3 cards or 3 resources. I wouldn't be shocked to see Zarathur show up at that planet, because he's certainly got fewer units on the tabletop, and furthermore, he kind of wants his Master Warpsmith to remain in play for as long as possible, though it's not as if it wouldn't be attacking as an effective 3-4 alongside Zarathur. We've got a copy of Warpstorm, which could deal out a considerable bit of damage to one planet. Guy indicates that he's going to pass. He's not affixed this copy of Gauss Flare to any units. He does have another copy of this max 1 per round reanimation protocol. He runs Harbingers of Eternity in his deck. It's a 5-cost Necron Elite that allows you to play Necron faction events from your discard pile as though they were in your hand, but that does come at the cost of removing those from the game. So that limit max 1 per round is still in effect, but that's quite a card effect indeed. Zarathur's Flamers, where are you going to go? I can't help but feel like this is going to give us a lot of information in regard to where we may see a possible Warlord commit. Bear in mind that Zarathur's Flamers can only target a non-Warlord unit. Alright, looks like Brian changes his mind on that one, so let's think about this. If Zarathur goes to planet number 1, he's going to have to do something like Archon's Terror to remove this Mandragoran Immortals, otherwise he could take 2-value ranged shots to the face here. The Tallarn Raiders could potentially swing for 2 against Zarathur, but that's not going to be too difficult to overcome, and the Destroyer Cultist can swing for 3, but the instant the Tallarn Raiders die, it's only going to be able to attack for 2, and then the instant the same Han Kinsman die, if that were to somehow happen, then they would be back to attacking for 1, and at the cost of 3, that seems somewhat unacceptable. But we've got that Archon's Terror, and depending on what our players draw during command, we could see myriad other effects here. Zave's Split Tongue goes to planet number 1, and this makes me think we might see some shenanigans occur in regard to a warp storm, possibly killing off some units at that planet. Zarathur himself doesn't really have any convenient means to... Like, Zarathur doesn't have the resources for a flamer or something, so, like, Warp Storm wouldn't kill the Immortals, it might kill the Talon Raiders, it wouldn't kill the Destroyer Cultists. The more units that die, the merrier when you've got Zaves at a planet. If we see the Talon Raiders sacrificed, sacrifice is not destroy. So I guess what are we going to see here? Both players send their warlords to planet number 1, and this is very interesting indeed, because note that Nahumekh has got initiative. At the beginning of combat, he's going to be able to reduce a target unit's HP by 3, and that will be Zaves, I can only imagine, so that 2/3 is going to be immediately destroyed. Guy only wins 2 resources during the command phase. Looks like the Rotten Plague Bears is going to deal a point of damage to the same Han Kinsman, and yeah, looks like it's going to be a card and 2 resources at planet number 2 for Brian. He did come across a copy of Warp Rift, so as an HQ action, you can switch a target planet with an adjacent planet, and whatever planet you switched out, let's see here. Units that were at a switched out planet are now at the switched in planet. So you move the planets and not the units is basically how that works. I'm sorry, so I guess I spoke too soon. So because we've got an Astra Militarum unit and a same Han Kinsman, an Eldar and an AM unit, that's only going to be -2 HP. What I was thinking of is the Destroyer Cultist's attack value of 3, so my apologies for misspeaking there. Zave's Split Tongue is going to be only at 1 hit point, but we are going to see Warp Storm resolve at planet number 1 here. So our players are thinking, how exactly does this work with Zaves? And I am at a little bit of a loss myself. Okay, yeah, so Glaive Guy indicates quite clearly that if Zaves dies, he's not going to have a chance to trigger his reaction. So I'm going to say I agree with Guy, same as Repulsor, Impact Field. All right, so after just a moment to go ahead and look up the interaction between Warp Storm and Zave's Split Tongue, it turns out how this works is that all units are assigned damage simultaneously, the players go through the process of shielding, and then all of those units die at the same time. So if Zave's Split Tongue were to be killed, he would not have the opportunity to use his reaction in response to any enemy units that end up dying. So it's going to be 3 points of damage to all enemy units that don't have an attachment, and it's going to be 2 points of damage to all of Zarathur's friendlies. So Zarathur himself takes 2 points of damage. This promotion preserves the Mandragorn Immortals, and amidst all the confusion here, looks like Brian may have forgotten that promotion confers immunity to Warp Storm. But, definitely thank you to both of our players here for just bearing with my request that they proxy some Necron cards. So, looks like Nahumekh has got initiative. All of these units are going to be rather grievously wounded, but thanks to the discard of a Gauss Flare, our Destroyer Cultist, that I believe had 1 point of damage, survives. We've got our Mandragorn Immortals taking a shot. It deals a killing blow to the, whatever it was that was right here, the Zave's Split Tongue, and, let's see, so the Mandragorn Immortals fired at range, and they are going to end up dealing 2 points of damage. So they killed Zave's Split Tongue. The Destroyer Cultist is going to take a swing of 2 at Zarathur, and thanks to the discard of an Archon's Terror, Zarathur does not take damage that would have resulted in his being bloodied, but now he's just at 1 hit point, and really the only option left is for Zarathur to retreat from this planet. If he does, Nahumekh is going to be able to clear out this Master Warpsmith, the Destroyer Cultist, because that copy of Talon Raiders was destroyed. It's only going to be able to attack for 2, and upon winning this planet, Nahumekh is going to be able to trigger Farron to rout, presumably this copy of Rotten Plaguebearer, so that it cannot finish off the same Han Kinsman next round. Nahumekh takes a swing and ends up destroying that Master Warpsmith, and now that puts Zarathur in a rather difficult situation indeed. This is going to be the first planet captured by our Necron player. It's going to add a red icon to his victory display, and if he manages to take our next 2 planets in sequence, then that is potentially going to be the game for him. Or I suppose if he does successfully manage to capture those 2 planets, then that is going to be the game for him. Brian only has one green strong point icon, so either he's going to have to win 3 planets in a row to get blue icon victory, or otherwise he's going to have to go for something like a planet 3 and a 4 win. Our Necron player on his enslavement dial chooses Astra Militarum. He's got a copy of Sakhalem Shrine Guard in his hand. We've moved through an HQ phase, and that's going to result in 4 resources and 2 cards for each of our players. Guy puts out a copy of the limited 1-cost support Sautek Complex. It's a location, and after you deploy a unit from a non-Necron faction, if you control no other units from that faction, you can gain your choice of a resource or a card. I can only imagine it's going to result in the Sakhalem Shrine Guard drawing him a card, and now he's going to have an opportunity to potentially do something with the 6 resources he has remaining, and wouldn't you know it, he was lucky enough to end up coming across another copy of Sakhalem Shrine Guard. Zarathur, in the meantime, has put out a copy of Promise of Glory. He's generated a couple of cultist tokens for himself. Without his Master Warpsmith in play, they only discount the cost of demons by 1 apiece, but it looks like he's just sacrifice them in order to fund a copy of Zarathur's Flamers. So as he's deciding what planet he wants to send that to, he's got a copy of Corrupted Teleportarium in play, which you can exhaust that support in order to move an elite unit you control from a blue planet to any other planet. And at present, there are 4 blue planets in play. We've seen all of our planets thus far. Zarathur indicates that he's essentially out of shield cards. Unfortunately, Zarathur doesn't have any units at green planets, so the Sakhalem Shrine Guard is going to be ever so slightly suboptimal, but it's played out to planet number 1, and let's see where exactly Nahumekh is going to decide to go. Nahumek's ability is currently going to decrease a unit's hit points by 2. He's got an Eldar and Astra Militarum faction units in play. Both of these 1 HP Destroyer Cultists are only going to be able to swing for, well, I guess 3 is a reasonably respectable number, but they've only got 1 hit point remaining, though Guy does have a copy of Reanimation Protocol, and let's see if Zarathur is going to be able to end up winning anything regarding command. If Zarathur goes to planet number 1, he's going to for sure have to retreat right away, but where exactly are we going to see Nahumekh go? Is it going to be planet number 1? Or is it going to be some other planet? Zarathur arrives at planet 4, which is going to be very interesting indeed. It's going to be the location of a Sakhalem Shrine Guard, and if Zarathur attacks and the Shrine Guard uses a shield card to defend itself, then that could easily result in, I suppose, the bloodying of that warlord. But Zarathur, if he wins that planet, he's going to be able to trigger Taurus and draw 3 cards for himself, And I suppose in the meantime, Zarathur does actually have the luxury of a Tzeentch's Firestorm to rely on. It's going to be one card and one resource for Zarathur from Planet 4, and, make that 2 cards and 2 resources for Zarathur from Planets 2 and 4. So with that Firestorm, he definitely got a little bit lucky in regard to command, and then this is going to be Planets 1 and 3, one by Nahumekh in regard to his own command. He got a total of 2 cards, 2 resources himself. He ends up killing that copy of Rogue Trader at the beginning of the combat phase, thanks to Nahumekh, and he ended up drawing a copy of his signature attachment. Interestingly enough, Glaive Guy decides not to trigger Aatrox Prime. I don't know why exactly he wouldn't want to deal a point of... I guess what exactly... Okay, so at the beginning of the combat phase, Nahumekh has decided not to kill off the Rogue Trader, so he decides to retreat with his Warlord, which is very interesting. And now I guess what exactly is Guy thinking here? Zarathur's got 1, 2, 3, 4, 5 units, so the Sakhalem Shrine Guard ends up taking a swing and killing off that Rogue Trader. And what is Guy thinking? So it's, anyway, Zarathur's got 4 units. Nahumekh has got 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6. Once the Shrine Guard are going to be destroyed, the Mandragoran Immortals could have sacrificed this soldier in order to ready themselves, but that still would have been 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, relative to Zarathur's 1, 2, 3, 4 units. So... that was kind of confusing. Maybe Guy thought he had 1 fewer unit than he actually does. But anyways, like I was saying, okay, so Glaive Guy says, oh, I'm not at Karrnath, what a scrub. So... man, oh man, I'm super confused, but in any case, Staff of Command is the signature attachment for Nahumekh. You stick it on your Warlord for the cost of 0, and then you exhaust it to set your enslavement dial to another faction. So maybe you play an Orc and a Space Marine during the same turn, or maybe you play a unit of one faction, and then later on you end up... doing something like using a Mind Shackle Scarab to gain control of an enemy unit. There are a fair few different effects. We've got Battle at Planet number 4. Zarathur swings for 2 at the Sakhalem Shrine Guard. We see that signature attachment discarded, and interestingly enough, Zarathur ends up taking an attack from the Sakhalem Shrine Guard for 2. He discards that copy of Tzeentch's Firestorm as a shield, as opposed to using it offensively, and now Zarathur is going to have his cultist token take a swing, so the Sakhalem Shrine Guard is killed by a cultist token, and that is perhaps the first time I've ever seen a cultist token kill an enemy unit. So it's going to be 4 units relative to the 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6 of... Nahumekh. I guess, Brian was... okay, so Brian ended up triggering the battle ability of Taurus. So let's see here. After you win a battle, so you cannot. So I'm just gonna go ahead and say it like that. Basically what Brian is asking is he's won a battle at a red planet, but you win a battle, and then you've got an opportunity to react, then you can trigger a battle ability, and you're not going to be able to, say, win a battle, trigger Taurus to draw cards, and then play Gut and Pillage as a response. So let's see what, if anything, Zarathur can do to get himself back in on this one. All that Nahumekh is going to have to do is win a battle at a red planet, and that'll be his 3rd material icon, and then he's going to be able to win the game here. So if he ends up winning it, planet number 1, that is going to be the game for Nahumekh, but it's looking like... Zarathur here may make it very difficult indeed for Guy. Our enslavement dial is going to be set for Eldar, and looks like Hoop Jones drew some incredible stuff in his hand. He's got another copy of Master Warpsmith, which is going to double the value of each of his cultist tokens, but he's got an Infernal Gateway to put something like a Zarathur's Flamers into play for the cost of, I guess, just for the cost of 1. He's got a Shrine of Warp Flame, which could recur the Infernal Gateway or a Zarathur's Flamers, and most important of all, he got a copy of Gleeful Plague Beast, which, alongside Zarathur, can deal 2 points of damage to all of these Necron units, and bear in mind, they're all going to be arriving exhausted. And I suppose that Gleeful Plague Beast alone, especially in the company of Zarathur, could spell ruin for Nahumekh here. So if Nahumekh at any point ends up being bloodied himself, he's only going to be a 1/6 Necron faction warlord, which we have seen officially spoiled. We've got a copy of Gauss Flayer being associated with what? The Gauss Flayer is going to be slapped onto that Mandragoran Immortals. So if the Immortals shows up at this planet, we could sacrifice this, what is going to be arriving exhausted Sakalem Shrine Guard in order to ready it, and then it can subtract HP. We do have a copy of Backlash in Nahumek's hand, but unfortunately he does not have, anything along the lines of an elite to defend with it. And very important to bear in mind is, since we saw a Samehan Kinsman being put into play, I do not know if our Necron player drew a card courtesy of the Saw Tech complex, but he hopefully did. At Planet 2, we've got a Master Warpsmith. Cultist token is going to be sacrificed, and for the modified cost of 3, we've now got a Gleeful Plague Beast at planet number 1. We'll have to see whether or not Zarathur arrives at that planet. Note that our initiative token is going to be in the possession of our Necron player, but if our Necron shows up at planet number 1, if Zarathur's there, all of his units are going to take 2. If Zarathur is not there, all of his units are going to take 1. But he doesn't have much in the way of shields. He could use a copy of Reanimation Protocol during command to make sure that one of these units survive. And the Mandragoran Immortals are going to be able to survive, but the amount of damage that Zarathur can output to Nahumek's forces are going to be rather difficult for him to surmount. Zarathur himself can pretty much show up anywhere. I suppose he could arrive at planet number 1 and be shielded as the Gleeful Plague Beast erupts. And I guess kind of the crappy thing about this situation is Nahumekh does have initiative, so Zarathur could potentially be bloodied prior to his opportunity to retreat, especially if we see the Immortals. Alright, so both of our players are going to show up at planet number 1, and here's what I'd like to see happen. Nahumekh is going to have the first opportunity to take an action, so you may as well sacrifice your Sakalem Shrine Guard in order to ready your Mandragoran Immortals, but you're going to have to shield through a Zarathur's Flamers, dealing it damage. You're also probably going to have to shield through the Gleeful Plague Beast for it to be able to attack it ranged, and then Nahumekh himself might be able to also attack it ranged. So I don't know if Guy is going to be able to win this battle at planet number 1, but things are about to get very interesting indeed. 3 cards and 3 resources for our Chaos player, but he really didn't draw anything relevant to combat. Void Pirate, Rogue Trader, and a promotion, so he's got shields, but let's see if Zarathur gets bloodied, and let's see what exactly happens to Nahumekh at this planet. So we have any command actions or not? Looks like our players are maybe moving on to the combat phase. I'm not sure if anybody has any command actions. I think if it were me, I'd have just detonated the Zarathur's. Okay, good. Glaive Guy's indicating he's got a command action. I was going to say you may as well just blow up the Zarathur's Flamers during the command phase, because then if that's the case, you need not waste a shield card just to keep them alive. So, let's see. I will say yes, once we get to combat, it's simultaneous, but there are actions before that, my good sir. Okay, so here's what we're going to see. We see that copy of Reanimation Protocols played during command. That's going to be 2 points of damage off of the Destroyer Cultist. I think if Brian was wise, he'd pop the Zarathur's Flamers to potentially kill the Destroyer Cultist or anything else. Wow, so let's see. How exactly is this going to be working? I guess Backlash can't block the Gleeful Plague Beast's effect because it's not targeted, but we're using that as a shield icon. So as we're moving through the combat phase, the Gleeful Plague Beast is going to deal 1 point of damage to all of the friendly units. Gut and Pillage saves the Zarathur's Flamers. Zarathur is going to be spared by the promotion. The Gleeful Plague Beast takes a point of damage, and then all of those Necron units are going to end up being dealt a point of damage indeed. So let me take a moment to just apologize with how kind of confusing and sloppy today's match has been. But at planet number 1, looks like that was a dead copy of, I think, Samehan Kinsman, a dead copy of Sakhalem Shrine Guard, and the Destroyer Cultist here is going to be, I suppose one of them is dead, first of all, and then that's 2 points of damage on the other. The Mandragoran Immortals is also going to be sitting at 2 points of damage, and it's a bit of a shame we didn't see that Sakhalem Shrine Guard, which I believe went unshielded, sacrificed in order to ready said Immortals. So, Brian triggers his Shrine of Warp Flame after an enemy unit is destroyed to return the topmost Tzeentch trait card from his discard pile to his hand. It happened to be a copy of the 2 shield value Tzeentch's Firestorm, which could do wonders to keep Zarathur alive here. Or, okay, yeah, so he's moving his Zarathur's Flamers to his discard pile, and he's saying he should have used that during command. I think maybe Nahumek's minus HP ability hit the Zarathur's Flamers, but like I said, I do have to apologize for how kind of sloppy and confusing this match has been today. Nahumekh takes a swing, and this is going to be disaster for our Necron, because Tzeentch's Firestorm is going to be discarded as shield, and we're about to see Nahumekh be bloodied. I can only imagine. So what is this going to be? Is it going to be Zarathur taking a swing, killing the Destroyer Cultist? It's going to be the Gleeful Plague Beast bloodying Nahumekh. He is a 1/6, bear in mind. As you can see, the Proxy Veil has fallen off, and Baharoth is our proxied card, so this is actually going to be a 1/6 Warlord, not a 1/5 bloodied Warlord. The Gleeful Plague Beast has managed to bloody Nahumekh, and then Zarathur takes a swing at 2, and that is going to be a dead copy of that Mandragoran Immortals. Now there's no more than a mere Destroyer Cultist hanging out at this planet. It's going to be able to attack for 2, and it still has initiative. At the end of the combat round, Zarathur ends up retreating, and now it's going to be the Gleeful Plague Beast versus this 2/2 Necron unit. If it decides to stay, it's going to be able to attack first, and Glaive Guy has no cards remaining in hand. He does decide to stay. He's going to be able to attack for 2, so I will just say it swings for 2, and yeah, Glaive Guy calls out, well, that certainly went to hell, and it definitely did. Whoops, oh, pretend you didn't see that. I'll just say my bad. So the Gleeful Plague Beast now swings for its normal 3. It manages to destroy the sole remaining Necron, and now Karnath is going to be captured by our Chaos player. That's going to be a red and a blue icon for him, and now he's going to be able to trigger the battle ability of any other planet he would like. Yvonne is probably going to be pointless, but he knows that his opponent won't be able to benefit from that effect. Taurus, he can't really trigger. He decides to go with Planum. And that's going to be the Gleeful Plague Beast moved to our new planet number 1. So things are looking like they may be absolutely hopeless at this point for Nahumekh, dependent upon what exactly he draws. He gets a copy of Sawtech Complex, which he's not really going to be able to use because he doesn't have any non-Necrons to deploy. He can play an additional copy, and it looks like he decides to choose Chaos for his enslavement dial. So he drew a copy of his signature event, Hate, and as a deploy action, you can destroy a target army unit with a faction symbol that matches your enslaved faction, but you have to pay its printed cost. So to kill this 2 HP remaining Gleeful Plague Beast, you'd have to invest 5 resources, or you could use Hate during the deploy phase to kill that Master Warpsmith, but you are paying for to do it. When an enemy unit is destroyed, Shrine of Warpflame is going to allow Brian an opportunity to return another Tzeentch trait card to his hand, namely this copy of Tzeentch's Firestorm, and that's going to be all the more shields to help preserve Zarathur here. If by some miracle our Necron player ends up winning planet number 1, he's not going to be able to win the game here, and it looks like Brian is going to be deploying units rather heavily to planet number 2, so he's now got a copy of Possessed positioned at that planet. They're going to be able to swing for a total of 9, and that's going to be an incredibly daunting obstacle for Nahumekh to attempt to surmount, because total attack value of 9, we've seen him get rid of his signature attachment, and, even 9-3 is still 6, and that would still result in a dead Nahumekh. Hate could kill off this Possessed, so I suppose Guy is really looking like he's stuck between a rock and a hard place at this point. Zarathur is going to be able to fill the board with units, and it looks like at the very brink of victory, Nahumekh is going to end up losing this one, but Guy is currently AFK to attend to his progeny, so why don't we wait a moment for Guy to return. Okay, so it looks like Guy is back, and we've seen a little bit of a change of plans here. That copy of Possessed is actually going to be placed at planet number 1. I definitely would not be surprised to have Hate destroy that unit, but I suppose let's see what, if anything, Guy decides to do. He can either act now or forever hold his peace, or at least until the following round. What really kind of sucks for Nahumekh here is whatever planet he ends up going to, whether it's 2, whether it's 3, if the Possessed can be shifted to his position, he's going to have to retreat, and that basically walls him off from being able to win at Taurus. I would not be shocked to see Zarathur arrive at planet 2, just in case Nahumekh did decide to go to that planet. Looks like Nahumekh did decide to go to planet 2, and we've got Zarathur arriving at planet 3. So planets 1 and 3 are going to be command wins. For Zarathur, it's going to be a total of 1 card and 3 resources for him. We've got a second copy of Infernal Gateway, and now let's see what Glaive Guy got. He did stumble upon 1 copy of Talarn Raiders. He's going to take a point of damage from the Rotten Plague Bears during command, or during combat. Doesn't really matter I guess it does matter. Nahumekh no longer has his abilities, so I take that back. It does not matter at all. And wouldn't you know it, I guess I forgot about this corrupted teleportarium is going to relocate the Gleeful Plague Beast away from planet number 1 to planet number 2. So its forced reaction is going to go off. It's going to deal a point of damage to itself, but it's going to be a 3-2, maybe 3-1 unit, which is going to be able to stay and harass the hell out of Nahumekh. And because he's only going to be able to attack for 1 apiece, it's going to be rather difficult for Nahumekh to chew through all these shield cards here. So the Void Pirate dies, the Rotten Plaguebearer takes a point of damage, Nahumekh himself is going to take a point of damage, and this is all at the onset of the combat phase. We're going to see a battle at planet number 1, and the Master Warpsmith kills the same Han Kinsman. I was going to say if Nahumekh survives long enough to have another deploy phase, he could toss out a copy of the Talon Raiders, activate both copies of Sawtech Complex to draw him another couple of cards, and that might be a great opportunity for him to just get more cards, because he's definitely at a lack, and I guess it's going to be up to Nahumekh to either retreat. Okay, he's going to accept his fate here, so Nahumekh takes a swing at the Gleeful Plague Beast, and this is essentially Glaive Guy calling out GG right here. So yep, he calls out good game. Of course, the Possessed would be able to swing for 9 and end up obliterating Nahumekh. So my dear viewers, that was, just like Brian is saying, an absolutely bizarre game. It was a little bit ridiculous. Hopefully you didn't mind some of the takebacks and slight rules mistakes too much. I really appreciate your tolerating me proxying some stuff and not having, I suppose, commit the entire rules reference guide to memory. So Zarathur managed to win this one. It was a hell of a deck, a rather interesting construct indeed, and unfortunately Nahumekh was just not able to reach critical mass to be able to survive just the sheer ridiculous output of damage that Zarathur can manage. So I hope you enjoyed this video. Congratulations again to Brian for winning this one, but of course very well played all the same by Guy Lev for giving our Necrons a try, and having recorded a total of 2 Onrakir matches, 2 Nahumekh matches. I think it's time to put the Necrons to rest, put them back into their dormant state until we see the eventual reveal and release of our Legions of Death Deluxe expansion. So, dear viewers, let me know in the comments what you think of the Necrons faction, what you think of Nahumekh. Is he inferior to Onrakir as he feels? Is there any hope for this warlord? And for both Onrakir and Nahumekh, where do you see them potentially being in regard to tier ranking? For Legions of Death, we've got 5 or 6 Necron cards, which we've yet to see. We've got all of the common original core set faction units that we've yet to see, with the sole exception of Standard Bearer. All of those work better when they're paired with a warlord that lies outside of their affiliated faction. So maybe if they're all as powerful as the Standard Bearer, Nahumekh might be pretty damn decent, or otherwise perhaps he is a little bit underpowered. But the Death World cycle is soon to come. I'm sure that our Necrons are going to be getting a bunch of support. So again, thank you so much for watching, and as always, if you enjoyed this content, be sure to hit that like button and subscribe to my channel if you've not done so already, or if you are already subscribed, as ever, you're encouraged to share this content, because the more engagement these videos receive, more players are going to stumble upon Conquest, they might give it a try, join our living card game community, and together as a big group, we continue to send a message to Fantasy Flight Games, telling them to continue to support this fantastic product. If you ever want to get in touch with me, I'm on Twitter, I'm on Facebook, and if you'd ever like to help financially support the Hive Tyrant, even the donation or contribution of $1 does wonders in helping me to recover my file hosting and operating expenses, and further to improve upon the audio and video quality of my channel. So once again, thank you for watching. Thank you for bearing with some, I guess, user error and commentator error. But as always, be sure to check back in again soon for much more Conquest LCG content to come.